Have you noticed that the fool off? That's because he is obsessed with humanity. He thinks that our fake emotions somehow... I have yet to give credit to that concept of soul for the sake of discussion. In contrast, the soul rests on the hypothesis... Nothing. I'll just say I need something... Well, now that you mention it, something did happen between me and my master. Before he put me down like a rabid dog, he and I had, and probably blinded by the volatile chemicals, I struggled and accidentally wounded him. Benign as it was, the weight of this scratch was immense. I still have no clear-cut explanation of... Exactly. You can bet some of my... Now...
Ah, I'm glad... As if I could expect anything less Yes, he's... Yes, I have been thinking about what you told me. You've provided me with some consistent food for thought, and while I still don't think that our neurocomp matrix is on par with the human mind, it's artificial, yes. And maybe the key to understanding the human mind first requires that we... There, that's what I want. I will be eternally... Same old, only with a new perspective. Pay attention to Roland's gibberish. Listen to James's songs. I will find my way. How may I help you? I thank you for this offer, but I won't take it. It's up to me. If I took it, I would be admitting I still require some kind of miracle. How may I help you?
Back for more? Remember,
So, how may I help you?
After the courier's departure, more and more people came to Hypatia, glad they could learn something that they would exploit to further their ends. Inevitably, the library suffered. With no more food stocks and barely any amenities to speak of, the flow of visitors soon dried up. Despite the vigilance of its denizens, countless books were ruined, profaned, or freely borrowed, as they would put it. But despite the countless abuse the library of Hypatia suffered, she nevertheless impregnated the minds of countless people. People who would bear its invaluable and otherwise forgotten fruits into the wasteland.
Now severed from his personality module's influence, Arthur resumed his duties with quiet impartiality. He kept a functional eye on the library's well-being, and also continued to answer any questions he was asked. Though without embellishment, Arthur was no more, and in his stead was a peaceful machine that provided clear answers when they were needed.
Released from his protocols and constraints, James wandered in the wastelands for a while. Though free from his questioning behavior, he was nevertheless curious about the lives of the people outside. At first he did so out of habit, in hopes to find a way to promote the library, and afterwards, because he simply found it all very interesting. And for the very first time in his existence, instead of asking questions, he began to observe and try to make sense of things on his own. Years passed, and he eventually came back to the library. Strengthened from his newfound wisdom, he managed his former function with a renewed open mind.
Helena continued to explore her own synthetic psyche. She often found clarity reading and rereading large quantities of novels, and in long conversations with the maintenance bot. Her occasional patients were also a great help for her. She had some success in tweaking her priorities and programming, and even succeeded in modifying her personality in order to fit her own desires and aspirations. Yet this was never quite enough for her to believe that she had a genuine soul. Eventually, her extensive work on herself made her wise far beyond that of common mortals and machines. She helped her patients discover themselves in ways she never suspected was possible. In the end, that made it all more worthwhile than any other spiritual quest.
Now free to take on the whole Mojave with his award-winning personality, Roland set out to playfully humiliate the inhabitants of this world, pushing them to the very edge of suicide, but stopping short, only because he was a good guy. Over time, things went more or less expected, and the Wastelanders didn't quite respond favorably to Roland's altruistic evangelism. Roland ended up badly beaten, dismantled for parts, and tossed down into a rocky ravine and left to rot more than he had hoped. And he had hoped it would only happen 24 or so times. And yet, against all odds, a kind soul came along every single time and hauled his broken and mangled body from that hopeless ravine and repaired him back to working order. Perhaps there is hope in this world. Or maybe it was that message he scrawled in his hull that read, "Super duper treasure in databank. Fix for free treasure map," that had something to do with it.
After the courier's departure, the maintenance bot's return, and Robson's demise, Edgard began to think really hard. A lot, a bit too much to be honest, happened in a short span of time, and for the first time, he asked himself if it was right for him to hide away. With Helena's help and the maintenance bot's guidance, Edgard progressively forgot his own inadequacy. And though he remained that strange little oddball, he nevertheless found his place in the library by becoming a teacher for young children. Though his teaching skills were practically non-existent, he did provide endless amusement to the children he was in charge of. After a while, the young ones discovered that enlightenment wouldn't come from Edgard's poor tutelage, but from their own curiosity. Edgard's joyful spirit, and even his teaching, was able to produce a safe space for learning, where they could learn at their own pace, that knowledge is nothing to be intimidated about.
The maintenance bot resumed his numerous duties with his usual stoicism. His dry, methodical work would ensure that the library's timeless collection would endure with the passing of time. On the occasion, he would help Helena in nursing Edgar back to some semblance of mental health. Inspired by the latter's progress, and his own stimulating exchanges with the courier, he began keeping most of his thoughts to himself, now trusting others' abilities to come up with their own conclusions. His constant occupations and occasional mentoring, coupled with a strict self-discipline, brought him an unshakable inner peace. And though he never forgave his master's poor choices and misguided tyranny, he still quietly mourned his death. As for the courier, it was now time for her to resume her quest. While Hypatia had been a strange step in her journey, she couldn't shake the feeling that it said something right within her. A strange feeling, as if something that was previously dormant was now hatching within. These machines had struggled with their own sentience to become more than what they were. In fact, she was not so different. She was also seeking herself, and maybe that meant becoming something different as well. All that mattered was to set herself in motion, and by leaving the library, that's what she began to do.